The axiom of superiority. The galaxy had known peace under the Talvex Empire for over 6,000 years. It was not a peace born of cooperation or mutual respect. It was the peace of absolute dominance. The Talvex had conquered 43 star systems, absorbed 29 distinct species, and built an empire that stretched across a full quarter of the known galaxy. They had achieved this through superior technology, ruthless efficiency, and an unshakable belief in their own supremacy. Commander Zirith stood on the observation platform of his flagship, the Crimson Sovereign. The massive warship was 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could glass a planet in hours. Behind it, stretched across the darkness of space, floated 200 additional warships. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Together, they represented the largest military force the Talvex had assembled in 3 centuries. Zirith was a veteran of 12 campaigns. His crimson scales bore the scars of 100 battles, and his 4 eyes had witnessed the fall of empires. He was tall by Talvex standards, nearly 3 meters from his clawed feet to the crest of horns that crowned his head. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, and their bodies were dense with muscle and armored with natural plating. They were built for war. "Commander, we have entered the outer boundary of the Sol system," announced Navigator Kelth, his voice carrying across the bridge through the neural link all Talvex shared. Zirith turned from the viewport and moved to the central command platform. Holographic displays materialized around him, showing the yellow star at the system's center and the 8 planets that orbited it. His eyes focused on the 3rd planet from the sun. A blue and green world wrapped in white clouds. "What is the status of the indigenous population?" Zirith asked. "Preliminary scans confirm approximately 8 billion individuals," Kelth replied. "They call themselves humans. They are confined primarily to their home world, with scattered settlements on their moon, the 4th planet, and various mining operations throughout the asteroid belt. Their technology is approximately 400 standard cycles behind our own." 400 cycles, Zirith repeated. He made a sound that approximated laughter among his species. "They are infants playing with rocks while we wield the power of stars." Science Officer Vraxa approached the command platform. She was smaller than Zirith, as most females of their species were, but her intelligence was legendary throughout the fleet. She had analyzed more conquered species than anyone alive. "Commander, I must voice my concerns," Vraxa said. "We have bypassed the standard observation protocol. Traditionally, we study a new species for at least 2 full cycles before initiating contact. We assess their psychology, their social structures, their breaking points." "Tradition," Zirith said dismissively. "Tradition is a luxury we afford to species that pose a potential threat. Look at them, Vraxa. They have been space-capable for barely 1 cycle. They still fight wars among themselves over patches of dirt and ancient superstitions. They have not even unified their own planet, let alone their system." Vraxa's tail twitched, a sign of unease among the Talvex. "With respect, Commander, it is precisely because they fight among themselves that I am concerned. A species that has not learned cooperation may be unpredictable. Or weak," Zirith countered. "We have studied their transmissions. They broadcast their entertainment, their news, their petty disputes into space for anyone to hear. They have no concept of security. They argue endlessly about resources they have in abundance. They are fractured, disorganized, and utterly unprepared for what is coming." The bridge fell silent. Ziritha's word was law aboard the Crimson Sovereign. When he spoke with such certainty, no one dared contradict him further. Even Vraxa bowed her head in submission. "Prepare the ultimatum," Zirith commanded. "Standard terms. Total surrender within 12 rotations of their planet. All military assets to be decommissioned. All governmental structures to be dissolved. All citizens to submit to Talvex authority. Those who comply will be allowed to live as subjects of the Empire. Those who resist will be eliminated." "As you command," Kelth acknowledged. The message was prepared in minutes. Talvex technology could decode and translate any known language within seconds. The ultimatum was converted into every human dialect, every written form, every method of communication the species used. When it was ready, Zirith gave the order. "Broadcast it. Let them know their world has changed forever." Across Earth, screens flickered to life. Television broadcasts were interrupted. Radio signals were hijacked. Computer systems displayed the same message. Cell phones rang with an alert no one had programmed. In every language, in every corner of the planet, humanity heard the voice of Commander Zirith. "People of Earth, you are now within the territorial boundaries of the Talvex Empire. Your continued existence depends upon your immediate and total surrender. You have 12 of your planet's rotations to comply with the following terms. All weapons will be destroyed. All military organizations will be disbanded. All governmental authorities will relinquish power. Representatives will present themselves at coordinates to be transmitted. Resistance will be met with complete annihilation. This is not negotiable. This is your only warning. For exactly 3 minutes, the world stood frozen. In New York, morning commuters stopped on the sidewalks and stared at their phones. In Beijing, government officials stared at screens showing fleets of alien warships entering their solar system. In Mumbai, London, Moscow, Sao Paulo, Tokyo, and 10,000 other cities, people looked up at the sky as if they might see the approaching threat. Then something unexpected happened. Something Commander Zirith had not anticipated and could not have predicted from his studies of human transmissions. The world did not descend into panic. The various nations did not turn on each other in desperate attempts to save themselves. The fractured, arguing, disorganized species that the Talvex had dismissed as primitive did something remarkable. They unified. In Washington, the President of the United States picked up a secure line and called Moscow. "We need to talk," she said simply. "Not as rivals. As humans." Within minutes, calls were being made between every major government on Earth. Ancient enemies put aside centuries of mistrust. Nations that had been on the brink of war hours earlier began sharing classified military secrets. Religious leaders who had spent lifetimes in theological debate stood together and called for unity. Scientists who had competed for grants and recognition freely shared their research. The United Nations convened an emergency session. Every nation sent representatives. There was no debate about procedure, no arguments about authority. The vote was unanimous and took less than 5 minutes. Earth would speak with one voice. Earth would stand as one people. Earth would fight as a single species. Admiral Marcus Chen was chosen to lead the Unified Earth Defense Coalition. He was 60 years old, a veteran of 3 regional conflicts, and had lost his son to war. He knew the cost of fighting. He knew the weight of command. He also knew that humanity had no chance of winning a conventional war against an enemy 400 years more advanced. "We cannot match their technology," he said to the assembled leaders. "We cannot match their numbers. We cannot match their firepower. But we can make them regret ever coming here." From his command center in Geneva, Admiral Chen broadcast humanity's response. He did not plead. He did not negotiate. He did not show fear. To the Talvex Empire. "This is Admiral Marcus Chen speaking for the people of Earth. We have received your ultimatum. We reject it entirely. You have entered our system without permission. You have threatened our home. You have 12 hours to withdraw beyond our outer planets. If you do not comply, we will consider it an act of war. We are prepared to defend ourselves. This is not negotiation. This is your only warning." On the bridge of the Crimson Sovereign, silence fell as Zirith heard the human response. Then he began to laugh. The sound echoed through the bridge and soon other Talvex officers joined in. It was absurd. It was insane. A species that could barely reach its own moon was threatening the Talvex Empire. "They are mad," Kelth said, his voice filled with genuine confusion. "They must know they cannot win." "Perhaps they do not understand what they face," Vraxa suggested, though her voice was uncertain. "Perhaps they believe we are bluffing." Zirith walked back to the viewport and stared at the distant blue planet. "Then we will educate them. Prepare all battle groups for advancement. Target their military installations, their communication satellites, their defensive positions. When the deadline expires, we will show them the price of defiance." "Commander," Vraxa spoke again, her concern growing. "I am detecting unusual activity. The humans are launching ships. Hundreds of them." "Their fleet?" Zirith asked, mildly interested. "No, Commander. These are not military vessels. Our scans identify them as cargo transports, mining ships, construction platforms, even passenger craft. They appear to be modifying them." Zirith studied the tactical display. It was true. Ships were launching from Earth and its colonies at an unprecedented rate. They were crude things, slow and ungainly compared to Talvex warships. But there were so many of them. As he watched, the number climbed past 1,000, then 2,000. "What are they doing?" Kelth asked. "They are welding armor plating to civilian hulls," Vraxa reported, her voice growing strange. "They are mounting weapons, mining lasers, industrial cutters, even chemical explosives. They are turning every ship they have into a weapon." "Who is crewing them?" Zirith demanded. "According to intercepted communications." Vraxa paused, checking her data. Volunteers. Civilians. They are not soldiers, Commander. They are teachers, engineers, merchants, farmers. They have no military training. Zirith felt something he had not experienced in many years. A small, nagging sensation he could not quite identify. It was not fear. The Talvex did not fear. But it was close. It was doubt. They are sending untrained civilians and unarmored ships against us, he said slowly. They know they will die. Yes, Commander, Vraxa confirmed. And they are coming anyway. The deadline approached. The human fleet, if it could be called that, positioned itself between Earth and the advancing Talvex armada. 3,000 civilian vessels converted into makeshift warships. Behind them, the blue planet they called home. Above them, the cold stars that held no mercy. Admiral Chen watched from his command center as the timer counted down. Reports streamed in from the fleet. Captains checking in, confirming readiness, saying goodbye to loved ones. He knew every ship that died would take dozens or hundreds of people with it. He knew the casualty projections. He knew this would be remembered as one of the darkest days in human history. But he also knew something else. He knew that humanity had never surrendered to impossible odds. He knew that humans had spent their entire existence fighting against nature, against predators, against disease, against each other. Survival was written into their DNA. Stubbornness was their inheritance. The refusal to quit was their birthright. All ships, he broadcast. This is Admiral Chen. In a few moments, we will engage an enemy that believes we are weak. They believe we will break. They believe we are not worth their time or their respect. They are wrong. Today we show them what it means to be human. Today we show them that some lines cannot be crossed. Today we fight for our world, for our children, for our future. Whatever happens, remember this, we did not kneel. We did not surrender. We stood and we fought. That is enough. That is everything. All ships, weapons free. Show them hell. The timer reached 0. The Talvex fleet advanced. The human fleet did not retreat. And in the cold darkness between worlds, the first shots were fired. Commander Zirith watched as human ships died. They died quickly as expected. His weapons tore through their improvised armor like it was paper. Explosions bloomed across the void. The death toll climbed into the thousands within minutes. But the humans did not stop. They did not turn back. A cargo vessel, its engines failing and its hull venting atmosphere, adjusted its trajectory and rammed itself directly into a Talvex destroyer. The crew had aimed deliberately. They had chosen to become a weapon. The destroyer's shields held, but the impact sent it spinning, and human weapons found the momentary gap in its defenses. Commander, Kelth reported, his voice tight with something that might have been fear. We have lost our first ship. Zirith stared at the tactical display. 1 Talvex destroyer gone. 30 human vessels destroyed in return. By any calculation, the Talvex were winning overwhelmingly. So why did it feel like they were losing? The battle raged on. And Commander Zirith began to understand that he had made a terrible, terrible mistake. The price of assumption. The war that Commander Zirith had expected to last days stretched into weeks, and the weeks bled into months. What should have been a simple conquest had transformed into a grinding nightmare that consumed resources, ships, and lives at a rate the Talvex Empire had never experienced. The Crimson Sovereign's medical bays overflowed with wounded. The morgue had run out of space by the 3rd week. Zirith stood in his private quarters, staring at casualty reports that made no sense. The Talvex had lost 47 warships. 47. In 6,000 years of expansion, they had lost fewer than 100 ships total across all their conquests. Now, in just 2 months against a species that should have been crushed in hours, they had lost nearly half that number. The humans had lost more. Of course they had. Their initial fleet of 3,000 converted civilian vessels had been reduced to scattered survivors within the first week. But where the Talvex saw victory, the humans saw only delay. Because while their makeshift fleet had died, Earth had been building. Building faster than should have been possible. Building things that should not have existed. A chime interrupted Zirith's thoughts. Enter, he commanded. Vraxa stepped into the chamber. The science officer looked exhausted. Her scales had lost their luster, and her eyes carried a weight that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible problems. Commander, I have the latest intelligence analysis, she said, her voice flat with fatigue. You need to see this. A holographic display materialized between them. It showed Earth's industrial output over the past 60 days. The numbers climbed in ways that violated every economic model the Talvex had developed. This is impossible, Zirith said, but his voice lacked conviction. I thought so too, Vraxa replied. But our reconnaissance confirms it. The humans have converted their entire civilization into a war machine. Every factory that made consumer goods now makes weapons. Every research facility now develops military technology. Every able-bodied person not fighting is building, assembling, or designing something for the war effort. They cannot sustain this pace. No species can. That is what I told myself 5 weeks ago, Commander. But they are not slowing down. They are accelerating. Vraxa manipulated the display, showing new images. These are their new warships. Not converted civilian vessels. Purpose-built military craft. They launched the first one 3 weeks ago. As of this morning, they have launched 114. Zirith studied the vessels. They were crude by Talvex standards, blocky and inelegant. But they were functional. More than functional. They were effective. How? He demanded. How are they building so quickly? They are not sleeping, Commander. We have monitored their communications. Factory workers are operating in shifts that allow only 4 hours of rest per day. Their leaders have implemented rationing that borders on starvation. Children too young to work are collecting scrap material from the streets. Every luxury, every comfort, every non-essential activity has been eliminated. Their entire species has accepted a level of sacrifice that our psychological models indicated was impossible to sustain. Ziritha's claws scraped against the metal floor. What else? Vraxa hesitated. They are learning from us. Every ship we lose, every weapon they capture, every piece of our technology they recover is studied and reverse-engineered. They cannot match our capabilities, but they are adapting. The weapons they used yesterday are not the weapons they use today. They iterate, they improve, and they do it at a speed our analysts cannot explain. Perhaps we need to change our strategy, Zirith said slowly. We have been trying to achieve a military victory. Perhaps it is time to break their will instead. Target their cities. Show them the cost of continued resistance. We have tried that, Commander. Vraxa's voice was hollow. 2 weeks ago we bombarded the city they call Sydney. 2 million dead in a single day. Do you know what the humans did? Zirith remained silent. They mourned for exactly 12 hours. Then they worked harder. Production increased. More volunteers signed up for military service. We killed 2 million and we made them more determined, not less. The commander turned away from the display. Then what do you suggest, science officer? I suggest we consider withdrawal. The words hung in the air like a physical thing. Withdrawal. Retreat. Defeat. Concepts so alien to the Talvex that they barely had words for them. No, Zirith said. We are the Talvex. We do not retreat. We do not surrender. We will increase our forces. We will commit additional fleets from other sectors. We will drown them in our numbers until they have nothing left to fight with. Commander, with respect, that is what they are counting on. Zirith whirled to face her. Explain. Vraxa pulled up another display. I have been studying human history. It is a brutal, violent history filled with conflicts that span generations. They have a term, war of attrition. They understand that if they cannot win through superior force, they can win by making victory too expensive for their enemy to afford. They are not trying to defeat us militarily, Commander. They are trying to make us decide that conquering Earth is not worth the cost. Then they will fail. The Empire has resources beyond their comprehension. Does it? Vraxa challenged. We have stripped 4 sectors of their defensive fleets to maintain our forces here. The Kelvin Protectorate has lodged formal complaints. The Zetharian colonies are reporting increased pirate activity with no military support available. And still, we are barely holding our position against the humans. What happens when other species see that the mighty Talvex Empire can be resisted? What happens when they decide to test our strength while we are committed here? Zirith had no answer. The implications were staggering. The Talvex Empire had been built on the assumption of invincibility. If that assumption shattered, the entire structure might collapse. A priority alert interrupted them. Navigator Keltha's voice came through the neural link, urgent and strained. Commander, we have a situation in the asteroid belt. Battle Group Theta is under attack. Details? Zirith snapped, already moving toward the bridge. Unknown, sir. They transmitted a distress signal and then went silent. We lost contact 40 seconds ago. Zirith reached the bridge at a run. The tactical display showed the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Battle Group Theta had been conducting a routine patrol. 15 ships, including 2 heavy cruisers. More than enough to handle any threat the humans could muster in that region. Send Battle Group Sigma to investigate, Zirith ordered. Full combat readiness. Battle Group Sigma consisted of 20 ships. They reached the last known position of Theta within an hour. What they found made Xeritha's blood run cold. Debris. Wreckage. Bodies floating in the void. 15 Talvex warships had been utterly destroyed. The carnage was complete. What weapon could do this? Kelth breathed. The answer came in the form of a human transmission. A video message broadcast from somewhere in the asteroid belt. It showed a human commander, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes. Admiral Chen's second in command, if Xerith remembered correctly. Commander Xerith, she said, her voice calm. You wanted to know what we are capable of. Now you know. We have learned much from studying your ships. We have adapted. We have improved. This is our space. These are our asteroids. You are not welcome here. Leave now, or what happened to Battle Group Theta will happen to all of you. This is not a threat. This is a promise. The transmission ended. Xerith stood frozen, his mind racing. Battle Group Sigma reported finding the weapon platform. It had been hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid, disguised to look like any of the millions of rocks floating through the belt. The humans had turned the asteroid itself into a weapon, mounting repurposed Talvex energy cannons powered by a fusion reactor that should not have been possible for their technology level to create. How many more of these do they have? Xerith asked, though he already knew no one could answer. Unknown, Commander, Kelth replied. The asteroid belt contains millions of potential hiding places. They could have one. They could have 100. For the first time since the invasion began, Xerith felt true fear. Not the small doubt he had experienced at the beginning. Real bone-deep fear. The humans were not just fighting. They were thinking. They were planning. They were turning their entire system into a trap. Pull all forces back to defensive positions around Earth orbit, he ordered. No more patrols. No more offensive operations until we understand the scope of their capabilities. It was not a retreat. Not officially. But it was the first step backward the Talvex had taken in 6,000 years. The next week brought fresh horrors. Human fighters, no larger than Talvex shuttles, began appearing everywhere. They attacked supply convoys. They ambushed repair ships. They struck at medical transports. They violated every rule of warfare the Talvex knew. There were no non-combatants in the human strategy. There was no honor, no restraint, no mercy. Xerith called it barbaric. Vraxa called it effective. The turning point came during the Battle of Jupiter's Moons. The Talvex had established a forward base on Ganymede, the largest moon. It was meant to serve as a staging ground for future operations. 200 Talvex soldiers occupied the facility, protected by defensive shields and automated weapon systems. The humans attacked with a strategy Xerith had never encountered. They did not send warships. They sent mining drones. Thousands of them, automated and remote-controlled. Small, cheap, and expendable. Each one carried a payload of explosives. The drones came in waves. The first wave was destroyed by the defensive systems. The second wave was destroyed. The third wave was destroyed. But each wave depleted the base's ammunition. Each wave forced the shields to cycle and recharge. By the 20th wave, gaps were appearing in the defense. By the 30th wave, the shields failed. Then the real attack began. Human warships, waiting just beyond sensor range, swept in and obliterated the base. 200 Talvex died. The facility that had taken months to establish was reduced to rubble in minutes. The humans had used attrition. They had traded cheap drones for expensive shields. They had forced the Talvex to expend their resources on meaningless targets until there was nothing left to defend against the real threat. They are smarter than us, Vraxa said quietly. Not more advanced. Not more powerful. But they understand warfare in ways we do not. They have spent their entire existence fighting each other. They have refined the art of killing into a science. Every trick, every strategy, every ruthless tactic has been tested and perfected over thousands of years of constant conflict. We are not fighting soldiers, Commander. We are fighting a species that weaponizes everything, including their own weakness. Xerith stood at the viewport, watching the distant lights of human ships patrolling the space that should have been his. 3 months ago he had commanded 200 warships. Now he had 153. 3 months ago, he had expected total victory within days. Now he was considering how to minimize losses during a retreat. Calculate the cost of continuing, he said finally. Full projection. What will it take to conquer Earth? Vraxa worked in silence for several minutes. When she looked up, her face was grim. At current attrition rates, we would need to commit the entire Talvex military. Every ship, every soldier, every resource. It would take approximately 18 months. And even then, victory is not guaranteed. And the cost to the empire? Total military expenditure would exceed our gross domestic product for 5 years. We would have to abandon every other territory. We would be vulnerable to every enemy and rival. The empire would survive, but it would be a shadow of what it was. And that assumes the humans do not find new ways to resist. Zirith closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw the faces of every Talvex warrior who had died in this pointless war. He saw the beginning of the end of his empire. He saw the price of his arrogance. "Prepare a message to Earth," he said quietly. "Offer them terms. We will withdraw to the outer system boundary. We will not return. In exchange, they cease all hostilities and allow us to leave in peace." "Commander," Kelth protested. "This is surrender." "No," Zirith replied. "This is survival. There is a difference." The message was sent. For 3 days there was no response. Zirith waited, wondering if the humans would reject his offer. Wondering if they would sense weakness and press their advantage. Wondering if he had already lost more than the war. Finally, Admiral Chen's face appeared on the view screen. The old human looked tired, but his eyes were hard as stone. "Commander Zirith," he said. "We have considered your offer. We accept your withdrawal. But understand this, you will leave our system immediately. You will take nothing with you except your ships and your dead. You will broadcast to your entire empire that you attempted to conquer humanity and failed. You will ensure that no Talvex vessel enters our space for the next 1,000 years. If you violate any of these terms, we will hunt you across the galaxy. We will find your worlds. We will show you what it means to truly face extinction. Do you accept?" Zirith wanted to rage. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to unleash every weapon at his disposal and burn that blue planet to ashes. But he was not that foolish. Not anymore. "I accept," he said. "Then leave," Admiral Chen replied. "And tell the galaxy what you learned here. Tell them that humanity does not kneel. Tell them that some species cannot be conquered. Tell them that we will fight to our last breath, our last ship, our last heartbeat. Tell them that we are human and that means something." The transmission ended. Zirith gave the order. The Talvex fleet turned away from Earth. They left behind the wreckage of 47 warships, the bodies of thousands of soldiers, and the shattered remnants of their reputation. As the Crimson Sovereign jumped to faster-than-light speed, Zirith looked back one last time at the blue planet that had defeated him. Somewhere down there, humans were celebrating. They had paid a terrible price. Millions dead. Cities destroyed. Entire colonies wiped out. But they had won. They had crossed every line the Talvex had drawn. They had endured every punishment. They had sacrificed everything. And they had refused to break. Vraxa approached him as they entered the jump corridor. "What will you tell the High Council?" she asked. Zirith was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice carrying a weight of terrible knowledge. "I will tell them the truth. That we encountered a species unlike any we have faced before. A species that does not understand the concept of acceptable losses. A species that will trade 10 of their lives for 1 of ours and consider it a bargain. A species that turns everything into a weapon, including their own mortality." He paused. "I will tell them that humanity is dangerous. Not because they are strong but because they refuse to accept that they are weak. And I will tell them that the Talvex Empire must never ever underestimate them again." Behind them, Earth grew smaller in the viewport. But the lesson it had taught would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The Talvex had learned the price of assumption. They had learned the cost of arrogance. They had learned that some species, when pushed to the edge, do not fall. They fight back. And sometimes, impossibly, they win.